Good morning. Some thoughts after visiting the Holy Land. All over Israel, during the last couple of weeks, the Rebbe's 25th yahrzeit was observed not just among Chabad, but among all those who have a belief in the holiness of the land of Israel and the need for Jewish people to be there. All those to whom is dear the love of every Jew. Almost all of the religious elements of our community celebrated and commemorated the Rebbe's 25th yahrzeit. To us, in Chabad, until we see Mashiach coming, there will be no consolation. And we do not forget our holy leader, because it is because of his inspiration, showing us what to do, that we do what we do. But in the process, there are different streams that come out and show who they are. I spent a Motzei Shabbos after Gimmel Tamuz in Modi'in, at the home of my nephew, Matanya Handler, before the night before the wedding of his oldest child, Orel. And I spent an hour talking about the Rebbe to people who were not Chabad Hasidim. At the end of the talk, the father of the bride talked about how the head of internal security revealed that he had an interview with the Rebbe, the head of internal security in the late 80s, early 90s. When he was appointed, not everybody knew he was appointed, and he came to this country, to the United States, to confer with other people in the intelligence community. When he came, there was a whole group of Chabad Hasidim waiting for him, telling him that the Rebbe wanted to speak to him. I don't know if he went right away or if he went a day or two later after he had met with the colleagues here in this country, the CIA. But he came to see the Rebbe thinking that the Rebbe would ask him about what he knew. Instead, the Rebbe told him intelligence reports, things that were secret about what was going on with all of the countries in the Middle East. And then the Rebbe concluded. It was an incredible briefing. He thought he was speaking to one of the greatest authorities on gathering intelligence of that day, because the Rebbe told him things that only people in the intelligence community knew. And then the Rebbe concluded by telling him that what's going to happen now is, as a result of all of these events that are taking place in these countries, they've decided on instructing people, inspiring individuals to go kill themselves in the process of murdering many Jews. And it is now your responsibility to go ahead and to develop a plan how to deal with this new form of attack. And sure enough, right afterwards, the individual suicide bombers came on the scene and murdered hundreds, if not thousands, of Israelis. But this head of the Israeli security had been forewarned, and when these things actually happened, he had already established a protocol how to deal with these threats, and in the course of time, they didn't eliminate all threats, but they eliminated most of the threats to the point where I was in Israel and no one was fearful in walking around, not in the old city, not in the shuk. Yes, there are individuals who are crazy, who will attack a soldier, attack an individual. But I saw none of that. I saw no fear at all. People going throughout the whole city, people traveling all over the country. Not that there is nothing to be concerned about, but because of Israel's security-minded people, these things don't come to the forefront. But it was the Rebbe who revealed to the head of Israeli security what exactly was going to happen and what he had to do. This was told right before the Rebbe's 25th yahrzeit. So I want to address my remarks to people who supposedly live in Lakewood, who issued a protest to Mishpacha magazine and Ami magazine for running articles in praise of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. As we know, we say B'Hashem Mishpata Yisham Po'alei. Shaul HaMelech, despite the fact that he violated the words of Shmuel, because he was not given the proper burial, the proper honor, because of that there was a plague that had descended upon Klal Yisrael. Even if you were to hold that the Rebbe had faults, and these faults were enormous, so enormous that you wouldn't want to honor him or his memory. Clearly now, you have to agree that there's Sham Pa'olei, that there's the effect of his 40 plus years, 43, 44 years of leadership. And after his passing, another 25 years have gone on. And all over the world, if you want to go to a far area of the world, there's a Chabad house. There's a place where you can pray, where you can study, where you can get kosher food. And this is something that tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of Jews benefit from yearly when they're traveling all over the world. So much so that in the common vernacular, the Chabad house is known as a place of refuge for all Jews all over the world. So just for that, the Rebbe should be given his due. There was a time when they did a survey of the students of Ur Sameach and Neish HaTorah, and about 85% of them, their initial contact with Jewish tradition was a Chabadnik went ahead and put on tefillin with them in some place. I don't know if that's true today, but 25, 30 years ago, that was the survey. So of the hundreds of thousands of Baalei Tshuva, the vast majority of them, their initial contact with Yiddishkeit was a Chabadnik who was sent by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Rebbe didn't do this in order to pad his group of Hasidim to have more Hasidim. Had the Rebbe been interested just in Hasidim, the Rebbe would never have engaged in his activities universally. Would have focused only in his community, strengthening the community, and drawing people to himself. And there are ways of doing that, as people know. Instead, the Rebbe focused all of his energies to saving Klal Yisrael and to helping to make sure that Klal Yisrael survive. So this too should be acknowledged by these luminaries, quote unquote, of Lakewood. That the Rebbe did not engage and accept certain activities by certain so-called Gedolim. The Gedolim are not mentioned, and What activities were referred to, we don't know. But I will tell you this. When Mihu Yehudi came on the scene, when they were changing the law of return, the Rosh Yeshiva in one of the major yeshivas in Bnei Brak made a pact with the government not to say anything about it in order to receive payments for institutions of higher learning. That's a fact. And he proceeded to say that the fixation on Mihu Yehudi is Yenem's Mishigas, it's his craze, the craze of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I asked you a question. The Rebbe was concerned about Mihu Yehudi, and Lubavitch was singled out by all of the reform and conservative organizations in this country as being the one that's behind trying to get back the law as it was, the law of return. Lubavitch suffered for that because a certain Rosh Yeshiva went ahead and ignored the danger in order to receive billions of shekels over the years in support for his institutions that are similar. I'm going to ask you a question. Who stands up for the Torah? Who stood up for the Torah more? The Rebbe who suffered and was embarrassed and raked over the coals on a daily basis in all of the newspapers for his incalcitrance of this old and ancient law that a Jew is only a Jew if he's born from a Jewish mother, or if they were converted, she was converted kahaloche, according to Jewish law. So the Rebbe suffered for that. And the Rosh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak got billions of shekels for his institutions for not opposing it. Who stood up for Torah and who didn't stand up for Torah? Who stood up that Israel should not negotiate giving away territories, that the more they give away territories, the more dangerous it would be to Klal Yisrael? Who was the one that stood up for that? Who was against negotiating with Arafat? And who was proven correct that with all the negotiations, all we got was more murder? Now it's as plain as day. But in those days, there was a certain Rosh Yeshiva who talked about how Rabbi Akiva was once shipwrecked, and every wave that came over to him, he bowed down to the wave, he accepted it, symbolically saying that when they have the nations of the world attacking you, you have to accept what they say, and you have to work with them, and you have to give in to them, because, he said, we've existed for 2,000 years without Eretz Yisrael. He said that. We can exist another 2,000 years without Eretz Yisrael. He also said that. Who said we can't give anything away? This despite the fact that the Rebbe personally never set foot in Eretz Yisrael. The reason why he never set foot in Eretz Yisrael is because he believed he could be more effective outside of Eretz Yisrael, and furthermore believed that the only way he could come to Eretz Yisrael was with Mashiach Tzidkenu. And he had his reasons, clearly his reasons halachically, Putera, and so on and so forth. Who stood up for Eretz Yisrael, for the lives of the Jewish people, including the lives of those who study Torah in Eretz Yisrael? Who was concerned about every living Jew? And who said we can live without Eretz Yisrael? Who went ahead and sacrificed his institutions and his biggest chassidim so that Jewish people should live. You know, among the Chabad Hasidim who set up Chabad houses, there are many simple Talmidim who in other yeshivas would never stay in yeshiva, they would go get a job. But among the people who started Chabad houses were also people who were big Talmidei Chachamim, big Chassidim, a tremendous knowledge in both Gemara and Kabbalah, as well as Chassidus. And they sacrificed their years so that other Jews should live. And they were successful. They helped other Jews live. And their success is not just the small individuals that they had direct contact with, but they had greater contact with than any other group, according to the Pew Survey. That notwithstanding that the Jews should have disappeared, there should have been a greater disappearance of Jews in assimilation, that because they had a Chabad house on university campuses, and so on and so forth, that this created an awareness of one's Jewishness that far outstripped what you could ordinarily find. So who was responsible for the awareness of the Yiddishkeit of a majority or a large minority of Klal Yisrael by sacrificing his own Talmidim for the benefit of Klal Yisrael? Who? The Rosh Hashiva of Bnei Brak, who called them names, or the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was called names and never called the other person a name back. Now we get to the concept of Mashiach. Clearly, according to the Gemara, Mashiach is a live person. More than likely, it will be a live person of this generation. Unless you accept Yerushalmi, as well as one of the opinions in the Gemara, in Sanhedrin, but it's a brachas Yerushalmi, beginning of Perek Beis. It's possible for Mashiach to be from the dead. I was told by some of the Christians are very happy about that. So I responded to a person who was originally a Christian. This is my convert, Amuna Murray, who's in Eretz Yisrael. She asked me about it. So I said that just because there's a concept that comes from Yiddishkeit and the Christians have taken that concept doesn't mean that it's not a Jewish concept. The fact that Mashiach could be from the dead is not a Christian concept, as others have asserted. The Yerushalmi says that the majority of the Amoraim, the last generation in the Yerushalmi, that was about the year 360 of the Common Era, said that Mashiach is going to be King David, David HaMelech. David HaMelech had been dead by that time 1100 plus years. Obviously, David HaMelech was dead. Nonetheless, the Yerushalmi says that it will be King David. And that's the reason why the Gemara in Sanhedrin asked the question, how can Rav say there's going to be another David when it says, V'avdi David Nosi Aleim? And they have to find an excuse and an answer, a difficult answer. But let's deal with the issue. The prevalent opinion is that Mashiach is going to be one of the people who is alive today. The author of that opinion, by the way, was none other than Rabbi Moshe Sefer, the Rabbi Pressburg, also known as the Chassam Sefer. Arachaim Reish Mem Ches, I believe, is the number 248. In it he says that Mashiach will not come from the sky, he will come from one of the tzaddikim of the generation. You have to ask yourself, did Rabbi Moshe Sefer think that he was the Mashiach? The answer is, he didn't know for sure, but he certainly entertained that possibility. So fast forward a few generations, Lubavitcher Rebbe is alive, and he feels that Mashiach is about to come. If Mashiach is to come in that generation, just 25 years ago, 27 years ago, 28 years ago, did the Lubavitcher Rebbe think it's possible that it's going to be him? Of course he did. He'd be foolish not to. He was a tzaddik hader, despite what the people in Lakewood say. He was the tzaddik hader. He was best friends with the Baba Sali, who studied Chassidus and honored the Rebbe. And those who know, he's best friends with many of the greatest rabbis of the generations. They might have disagreed with him in certain shittas, but he was very good friends with Rav Moshe, for example, Rav Moshe Feinstein. And in fact, their Rebbitzin spoke every week, every Erev Shabbos. So the Rebbe was a person whose finger was everywhere in Klal Yisrael for the sake of Klal Yisrael. Why 25 years after do you have to remind people of the fact that there was machlokes? Who will benefit from it? No one. Why did you have to make a protest? Because you want to feel important. No other reason. If the Rebbe was wrong, then he would be seeing it today in Shemayim. And if the Rosh Hashivas who attacked him were wrong, they see it in Shemayim also. Whatever is the emes is apparent to all those who are in Shemayim. It's unnecessary to go ahead and bring back old painful wounds and open them up. And so, I'm going to say, L'chaim Rebbe, your torch is burning bright all over the world, and we will continue to do what we're supposed to do, to bring Mashiach Tzidkeinu B'Korav Mamash.